In every person's life, there are two great days. The day they were born, and the day they understood why.
Yes, it's boring, he says. Boring. He says it seems like everything is there, but there is no happiness.
We have eaten, yet unhappy. There is money, there's an apartment, and I eat well. How to distinguish true happiness from pleasure? King Yudhishthira ran through the forest in search of his brothers. They went for water and should have returned to their broken camps a long time ago. Feeling that something had happened, he set out to search for them. Suddenly, the forest thicket ended, and the king stopped by the lake. On the shore, he saw the bodies of his brothers lying there. They were dead. The king felt that something was rising from the lake. In a moment, death itself appeared before him, which lived at the bottom of the lake. "I will ask you a riddle," she said. "If you answer correctly, I will bring your brothers back to life and let you go. If not, I will take your life as well." The king agreed. Death approached him and whispered, "What is the most amazing thing in this world?" King Yudhishthira pondered. After a few minutes, Death asked if he had an answer.
Oh, these Eastern tales. What is the most amazing thing? The most amazing thing is how my neighbor Lyuba from the second floor can live on her pension for a whole month, pay the utilities, and still treat all the kids in the yard with candies. In fact, the relevant question is how to learn to earn enough to cover everything. Everything else is just tales and philosophy. Well, to be honest, I do love fairy tales. I remember as a child, I loved watching the Snow Queen on New Year's Eve. It was snowing outside. It was New Year's Eve. After all, I believe so strongly in miracles. Indeed, in Santa Claus too. Yes, by the way, about Santa Claus. Dear Santa Claus, I ask you to give me a lot of money for the new year. As much as possible. After all, I behaved very well all year. Anya, second grade. Modern children no longer dream, of course, about Newton consoles, videotape players, cassette players, or music players. That's all in the past. No need. They have everything on their phones. I only had a rotary dial on my phone. But I remember, I really dreamed of having a small television that I could carry in my backpack. And during breaks between classes, I could take it out and watch the adventures of Electronic, or Just You Wait. Just the thought of it made me happy. Today, phones have everything. Movies, music, the internet, a camera, games. The question is, have my children become happier because of this? As a normal father, in my opinion, I started looking for an answer to this question. Why do children write such letters, and what can truly make them happy?
London, St. Paul's School. This is an elite school. They prepare children, teenagers, future leaders of the world, the powerful of the world. A child of my acquaintances comes to me and says, "What should I do? Everyone is using drugs. I don't want to. I'm an outcast. Everyone is using drugs." I ask, why? This is the same. An elite school, meaning these children have everything. What else do they lack? Why? Destroy themselves. Why destroy their inner world? The thing is, when you seek the answer to this question, it lies in the family, in adults, in the philosophy of life.
In the modern world, children are becoming more and more attached to the internet and the attributes of success promoted on social media. Branded clothing, gadgets, and so on. Gradually, they become infected with a sense of consumerism. Instead of responsibility, they get used to the idea that everyone owes them. Most modern children are in a difficult emotional state. The number of teenagers suffering from depression and hopelessness is rising, with a frighteningly high level of suicides among children and adolescents. And this is far from the school's fault. And this is not because they were born that way. Children learn to live by the model that adults offer them to achieve success and be happy in the way society suggests.
In this situation, their educators are the media, the internet, and social networks. What do they offer? Well, they offer us the trend of being famous at all costs, being successful at all costs, being rich at all costs. Confronted with reality and understanding that only a few can be rich, famous, and successful, many experience this as a kind of internal collapse. So, who am I supposed to be in order to be a happy person?
I see, as always, it's the parents' fault. In fact, in the search for this happiness, I've changed so many professions that I definitely can't be called a couch philosopher. I even once went to America for there is good where we are not. And here is Las Vegas. 2-story apartments, a pool in the yard. Well, it's public, but still fine. At my place, I have a maximum of a slide with a sandbox. And one day, a neighbor who helped me book tickets to New York comes in. So, as it often happens with migrants, longing, nostalgia. We started talking. But he shared how he made his way, lived in some semi-basement places at first, worked as a taxi driver, and then began to earn more and more. Now he has an apartment, another car, Rolexes, a restaurant, money, and everything is bad. Why? He says it's boring. He says it seems like he has everything, but there's no happiness. Well, look at that. We arrived right. If I had that, I definitely wouldn't be bored. Yes. Although later I started listening to wealthy businessmen and, in general, many have the same problems. No, well, the poor are also unhappy, but they justify it by saying they don't have an apartment, money, restaurants, or Rolexes. Yes.
Every person strives to be happy, but people try to find happiness by satisfying their own desires. And no one has succeeded in this, as there is no end to desire. As a result, a person does not experience true happiness, but is only occupied with trying to gain as much pleasure as possible, ultimately believing that this is the purpose of their life.
When we say that people are chasing happiness, they are seeking happiness, pleasure, and everything else largely, almost, always, this desire is to take for themselves. To take more of oneself, to take oneself to be more interesting, to take oneself to be warmer, more emotions, more impressions. You are trying to pump up your inner self, your inner ego, and there is practically no limit to this. And so you try to take something from this vast world into yourself. This position has a colossal vulnerability. A person quickly gets tired, quickly becomes accustomed to this self-satisfaction. And based on this simple formula, the conclusion is very logical. You will never be happy in this state.
To say that money will bring happiness is quite ambiguous. There are countless examples, including people I personally know who are very wealthy, yet deeply unhappy. We can talk about certain pleasures that can be obtained, and they also do not lead to a state of happiness in essence. These are definitely temporary things, after which complete emptiness returns.
Very often, people confuse happiness and pleasure. In the modern world, there is a consistent and intrusive propaganda convincing that supposedly pleasure is happiness. And to become happy, one just needs to consume and enjoy as much as possible. But in the pursuit of satisfying one's desires, a person begins to feel inner emptiness and tries to fill it with an endless search for more and more pleasures.
Again, great. So does this mean that I mixed everything up? And instead of happiness, I was striving for banal pleasure? No, well, let's be honest. Pleasure is also normal. When I eat my favorite charlotte, my mood improves. No, well, of course, I understand what is being talked about. Recently, I had such an episode in my life. I went to a women's pretrial detention center. Well, a prison in simple terms. I conducted acting workshops, helping to finalize a play about Viktor Frankl and the inmates of concentration camps. You see, it so happened that the imprisoned girls played the roles of inmates in a concentration camp, experiencing the pain of being in a place where a person should not be by nature. And through this theatrical act, there came an inner realization for all of us who watched this performance that it is possible to remain human, to preserve the meaning of life, and to hope for the better, even in such circumstances. Then when they came out to bow and the song "Do Not Condemn Me, Lord" played, I did not feel strong emotions in any of them. Not in any theater, not at any performance. When I looked at the guard who accompanied us everywhere, so gloomy and serious, he had tears welling up in his eyes. When I was returning home, I felt that this day was not lived in vain. I felt like a truly happy person. But in essence, I did not acquire anything material.
How can we distinguish true happiness from pleasure? Pleasure quickly becomes tiresome. Happiness, on the other hand, never becomes tiresome. It only deepens. We receive pleasure when we take something. Happiness, when we give, when we do something good for others. In striving for pleasures, a person's heart becomes harder. In contrast, happiness makes a person kinder. Unlimited pleasure leads to addiction, enslaving, and it doesn't matter what it is, gambling, sex, or shopping. Happiness, on the contrary, makes a person free, independent of external circumstances. We get tangled up under the influence of our endless desires for enjoyment. As a result, we have disposable relationships, a disposable life, a disposable planet. Therefore, perhaps soon, we will need to look for another planet.
You've eaten and are still unhappy, and you have money, and it seems you have an apartment, and it seems you eat well, but there's no sense of satisfaction. Where else can I find something? Well, let's say I'll go to a super expensive resort, or let's buy myself another super expensive apartment. But you'll follow the same patterns, meaning you're making the same mistake. Structurally and methodically, you are mistaken. And when you reach a certain ceiling, by the way, if you don't burn out, there is a colossal risk. A person can burn out in this race for inner self-satisfaction.
Yes, it's certainly hard to argue with that, but the desire is still there. I am a living person, not some virtual Alice. And yes, I want an apartment closer to the center, a more expensive car, and recognition in the end. I want that too, because it's normal. How can one live without it? But I must admit, there was a time when I went to film a report for a fund, and there were so many people in one place radiating happiness. The last time I probably saw that was when I went to a kindergarten for a New Year's party. I thought maybe they have some kind of holiday there too, but the next day everything repeated, and the next day, and then, and so on. I thought, it's strange, why are they so joyful? They have nothing there at all. They just have their robes, shoes, and prayer beads, that's all. And we have so many things that we worry about, that we are so anxious about, and we are still unhappy. Strange. And these valuable things that are significant to us, one monk said that for them, they are just candy wrappers. That is, not even the candies. And you know what this monk told me? He said that there is a body that really needs things. An apartment, a trip to Egypt, some jewelry, And there is the true self, the soul, which is inside this temporary body. It needs a completely different kind of food. And we are trying to provide material food to this true self. It is as crazy as trying to connect electric wires to yourself and hoping that you will shine with happiness like a light bulb in grandma's lamp.
Why does a person not experience true happiness from material things? Because by nature we are spiritual beings, and we cannot be truly happy just by satisfying our desires. If a fish is pulled out of water, it cannot be happy, even if given all available pleasures. Its suffering cannot be alleviated until it is taken from an alien environment. All our material desires and the pursuit of pleasures are directed towards our body, but the body, it is just a machine for our true self, which is the soul. Suppose a person has a car, and to make it run, they fill it with gasoline. For themselves, they buy food. But if the driver starts drinking gasoline, will he feel happiness from that? Similarly, satisfying only material desires cannot bring us happiness. It is necessary to find the appropriate food for the true spiritual self that governs the body.
A trick question. How is a monk, who has nothing that we strive for and try to achieve in society, happier than we are? And there are plenty of such examples. That is, we meet these wise fathers of ours, and we see how happy they are. We just cannot understand how that is. Why is this person who has absolutely nothing happier than I am? It just seems to radiate from him. I want that too. Here's another story.
With all due respect to the speakers, let me finish the story about my friend in Las Vegas. At that time, there were competitions in Las Vegas similar to a triathlon, and my friend was a champion in that sport. So he decided to participate, why not? All night he prepared, very diligently with friends at the restaurant. On the day of the competition, I step out of the house and see a large Russian group gathered. The guys come up to me and tell me that my neighbor's heart stopped during the swim due to overexertion. At the funeral, I found his face to be very calm and serene, unlike the last time we met. Apparently, the race for material pleasures was already over for him. He left this world in a regular classic suit, and all the Rolexes, the restaurant, the apartments, the cars, everything stayed here. He left this world as he came here, with empty hands. Yes, there is another story on this topic. An elderly woman told it to me. Her friend passed away.
She was already over 80. Workers began to clear the apartment of her belongings. She had a bulky writing desk, and to avoid carrying it down the stairs, the workers threw it out of the window. The desk with drawers fell to the asphalt with a crash and broke. Photos scattered across the yard that were in the desk. Here she is as a child. Here she is in school. Here are her wedding photos. Here are pictures from work. A worker approached her entire life and began sweeping up the photographs and putting them in the trash bin. And I realized that this would happen to me too, for what I lived for.
But I always feel sorry if a person lived their whole life and never asked the question, why? Never asked the question, who am I? Why? What? This is my body. Who lives in this body, and how does it all function? And this phrase of mine, died without being born. When a person's whole life has passed, it was not interesting at all, and so it ended. It turns out that he just ate, slept, and reproduced. Essentially, The difference is from a virus that also reproduces and occupies larger territories, and simply did not happen. Biological life, both of humans and animals, is built on 4 principles.
This is food. A dog eats, and a person also eats. Sleep. A horse sleeps, and a person sleeps too. Reproduction. Both humans and monkeys engage in this. And defense. A hamster makes a burrow for itself. A person also builds a house. These 4 principles are equally characteristic of both humans and animals. Their improvement is not a sign of human civilization. A person differs from other living beings in that they can ask themselves questions like, who am I? What is the meaning of my life? And if a person does not do this, then they essentially live a life no different from that of an animal. In every person's life, there are 2 great days. The day they were born, and the day they understood why.
Mark Twain mentioned a 3rd day, a very important day in your life when the results of your life are summed up. And as they say, you can't take it with you in the coffin, meaning you can't take all your whims and desires with you. The only criterion will be within you. Who are the people that thank you for living? It may happen that despite having all the blessings, there is no one to say thank you. Then why were you there? Or why were you here, dear friend? What was it in your life?
Every second, hundreds of people leave this world on our planet. This is happening right now, with someone else. But do we think about the fact that it will happen to us too? Our perception of the process of dying is superficial. As long as a person is full of life, they forget about the relentless death, a meeting with which they cannot avoid. No matter how much material wealth you gather in the game called life, money, things, and enterprises, in the end, it all goes back in the box. Death approached him and whispered, "What is the most amazing thing in this world?" King Yudhishthira pondered. After a few minutes, Death asked, "Do you have an answer?" The king raised his head and said, "The most amazing thing is that a person constantly observes death around them, seeing the death of acquaintances, friends, and relatives, but behaves as if they will never die." Death dissolved, and life returned to the brothers.
Well, yes, death is something that happens to others. That's how everyone usually thinks. We had a parishioner in our temple, Uncle Andre, a former military man. Despite having sick legs and no right arm, he always tried to help everyone. In the summer camp, in Sunday school, and of course everyone loved and respected him very much. I remember one little girl came up to him on his birthday and said, "Uncle Andre, you are so nice. I wish for you to grow a new arm soon." We both laughed a lot about it. In the fall, he got sick and had to go to the hospital, and after 2 months, he practically escaped from there for the holiday. It was the Kazan holiday. He arrived in good spirits, smiling warmly at everyone, took communion, exited the church, and suddenly fell. Everyone got flustered, started to provide some help, and called an ambulance. I held his head above the cold ground and looked at him, thinking that he would soon open his eyes and smile. But he left this world. There were people around him who loved, respected him, and prayed for him. It was in many ways reminiscent of a miracle. The bell rang reminiscent of a tuning fork, of death. It is also in some ways a kind of tuning fork. What have you done? Why did you live? Death is essentially the tuning fork of reality that you hear as if saying time is irretrievably passing by. Do what truly makes sense. What makes both yourself and those around you genuinely happy.